Alrighty, let's dive into kind of how to make a plan out of all this information. And I think here is kind of the crux of the whole situation is that, in my elk hunting course, I always talk about how to be efficient and effective. And that to me is one of the most important things. Like, you're in huntable areas, places where you can get it done. Now, that's a whole art in of itself, but at the end of the day, we need to be able to find elk quickly. We need to be able to cover ground, cover these areas, and figure out if there's elk in there, where the elk are, and then we can hunt them, right? And it's all about finding elk efficiently and quickly. And so that's when, building these routes really comes into play, because you just can't do this effectively in the woods. Now, there's a lot of things you can learn by scouting and figuring this out. But at the end of the day, I think, man, you can figure out routes and figure out how to access things quickly and efficiently by looking at, from space, right? Like from having this bird's eye view of things and saying like, oh, if I go through here, this is the most efficient route. There are definitely hiccups and you're going to hit the ground and you're going to there's going to be things that you didn't see from e-scouting. But I think at the end of the day, like it's all about how do we effectively hunt this area. So now we kind of have this big area that we're like, okay, this is interesting. It's worth scouting. It's worth looking and seeing if there's anything there. And so, how do we even figure that out? And this is the cool part. I think, you could take this area right here, and I think in 24 hours, I could tell you whether there's elk in this area or not. Now, ideally, I'd like to have a little bit more time, but by finding the route, I think, you can cover one or two places and know kind of the bulk of everything in that area. And if you look at this area, it's kind of two main drainages here, and then you kind of have an end piece, right? Now, there's more stuff over here that we could figure out as well. But the one thing I'm always looking for is like, how do I slip in and slip out and in one evening or a morning and evening tell you whether there's elk in this area or not? And I think that's very doable for this area. So the next thing we want to do is, as we start to plan this, we're going to try to figure out how can we efficiently look this area over. And so we're going to try to find routes. And the first and foremost, I'm going to say like, these three pins are all on, or these three glassing pins are all on one ridge kind of, maybe even this one ridge right here is kind of, man, I think I could tell you a lot from that. And then you kind of have these two over here. And so instead of, driving around the mountain, can we access it from the same point and things like that? So we're trying to figure it out. And what I'll start to do is really just try to figure out, and I might switch to satellite for this, figure out, where can I get to these glassing points and how far are things? So that's a big piece of this is I'll just use the line tool and I'll start, lining out, a route. Is this something I could hike? How far in is that glassing point? Well, that's only 1.1 miles. That's pretty doable. Now, I imagine if we save this and we look, we're 1,500 feet. That's not terrible. That's very doable. And I'm actually going to delete this because I already have this one. But so I start to test these routes, and I'm looking for routes just to kind of figure out how to get to places, how to efficiently get to places and look. And then I'm just going to turn these on because I already did this. So empty routes here. So what I like to do is I'll turn my routes on, and as you can see, I kind of have the dash lines for things that I'm going to be walking, and then these are driving access. And I do like to highlight the driving access because before this was on, you actually, let's see if I can hide this real quick. Oh, not a big deal. Now I can see, where I can drive to or, where the access is from. And this actually really helps when you zoom out big picture, to see, how far around you got to drive and things like that. So what we find is like, I start to dabble and I'm like, man, just getting to this glassing point would tell you a lot. Getting all the way up to this one, it didn't really buy me a whole lot. Can I figure it out from this one? Maybe, and I think there's actually probably some more we could move down this ridge. But from basically the same driving access, we can move around and get up here and glass back the other way and glass into a bunch of these little pockets that we have highlighted as really good areas. So, this is a good example. This way is a little bit shorter. It's 2.3 versus say 2.6, fairly equidistant in the long run. But one of the things I like is that, if we were to go check this area, like we create a plan, we're like, hey, we're going to go look in this area. I can access it from without having to drive all the way around, which saves a ton of time. Now that, we may find that this way is better for a different reason, but as of now, I like to test these and say like, oh, can I go this way or can I go this way? Another reason, as you see, actually, and this we'll get into this in a little bit, but I use brown as like a travel route, and I noticed as I was zooming in here that like this bench right here seems just like a travel corridor to me, and I wouldn't want to hike through it a ton until I knew which way or the other. But maybe you get in there and you're like, man, these elk are using this. There's a ton of sign on this. We might not want to hike through that. So this is a better way to come in. So essentially, the first thing I'm going to do in building the actual hunt plan is to start to test these routes. I'm going to figure out which is the best way to access things, and which way is, the best way to get in and out of an area. Ridges are great and they save, quite a bit of time versus just kind of going straight line, but at the same time trails are always faster, and so that's one thing to remember. Maybe we map out a line here and we say, okay, let's just figure out how far in here it is, and I just like to run my line up these trails just like this, and let's say we wanted to get up into this area, into this one, and so I'll set that. That's 3.5. Man, that's very doable. It's very hikeable. There's a lot of things we could do in here. We could go check this bedding area. We could check this water hole. And the other thing I like about this one is we can move in here and maybe we could hear a bugle just by being in there. And so we're going to mark that as a route. We're going to set it, and we're just going to save it. And then once that's saved, we can add that. And we can do this later, but I'm just going to add it now. Well, we're going to add that to a folder. Add to folder, and we're going to say routes. So now I have all my routes kind of saved in here. And these are great scout plans. These could be great hunt plans too when it comes to finding elk. But now I've got this area, and I know that within these 2-3 routes, I can pretty much figure out if there's elk in this area. So this is definitely going to be something I want to figure out. The other piece of this is a lot of times you don't actually know if you could drive or how good the drive is. So, on my scout trip, I'm going to want to make it a point to access all of these hard yellow roads and just see how far I can actually get, how used the trailhead is, those type of things. But this gives me kind of a good hunt plan right here. Like I know I could go up here, I would say if I'm looking at this right now, my first scout priority would be to get to this glassing point because I do feel like you can see the most. And then, watch that for an evening. Maybe I climb back down, and then the next morning I climb up to this one, or vice versa. I have to think about that. The nice thing is like if I climb up here in the morning, I could, hike back down, hike up in here, and check, check sign, check the creek bottoms, check bedding areas, any of those things where I might just find elk sign. This is a good way to do it. And then I could probably be back up on this one, by the evening hunt. This is a pretty doable one-day scout. I could tell you if there's anything in there or not. Now, if it was super windy, I might not be able to hear something, and I might want to look at it longer. But this kind of gives you an idea how you can access this and like, okay, I have this hunt plan. Now we can basically take this and extend this to another area. So the idea is to have 3 core areas before we have multiple options, right? So maybe this area, and now this one I kind of scouted a little bit different, more for a glassing. So same, we found this access point off this top, and it comes in high, which is great. There's a ton of glassing up here. So we made routes, to try to figure out, can we access all these? And again, like this is probably a 24-hour hunt or scout, I should say, to find elk or not find elk. And, maybe we spend a little more time if we're absolutely convinced, but this is, these 3 bundles here are kind of good areas. They're very open. They're very glassable. Now, you could come this way, you could come this way, however you want to skin it. Just kind of marking out different routes, different plans. Now, as you do this, and say I go do another one, now I have multiple options. I may go in and go on a scout trip and check all 3 of these on a weekend, or maybe both of these on a weekend. And it kind of gives you an idea, okay, what did I see? What did I not see? Now, the other folder that I have that isn't in here is called critters. And I like to have a critters folder, which is to say I like to have a folder that has all of my sightings. So let's hypothetically say I went in and maybe we see some elk. Let's mix it up and say they're not where we thought they were. I don't know. Trying to find a place. Okay, we are going to say they are where we are. Okay, so like we could drop a pen and say, "Oh man, we saw a herd of elk here," and this will have the date, and you could add notes. Shooter bowl. I don't care what you do. So, you could. That's a mule deer buck. You could add your pens and then be able to. All right, so then we have kind of okay, we've seen elk here, and then the other thing that happens, this is going to give you a data point, and I like to be able to hide this, and that's why I have a folder. Is like to be able to hide them or put them on, depending on what I'm thinking. But a lot of times, what I've found is that I'll have my 3 hunt areas, and randomly I'm just gonna drop pin somewhere. I don't know. Let's say on the road, I saw elk right here, and I like to mark every elk I see when I'm out there, and then that has the date as well, and if all of a sudden I start seeing a pile of pens kind of in the same area that I was driving this road, man, an elk crossed the road on me, all of a sudden, like, that gives me things to go back on. And once I have this system, this kind of gives you an idea like where we're going with all this. Is like once you have a system, like, it's pretty easy to say, I'm out there, I ran through 3 plans. Okay, what's my next plan? I can pull up and say, what have I seen? Where am I seeing these animals? And it could be an elevation thing. It could be, just an area that you hadn't really looked at on the map, and you're like, man, I've seen a ton of elk in this region of the unit. Those type of things, and it kind of gives you the ability to go back and put another plan together. And from this, like, you can have infinite plans, and so you have this fallback, this ability to, in the middle of a hunt, say, okay, let's come up with a new plan. How are we going to do it? Let's look at new areas, and you don't even have to fly anymore. If you're purely, you've been in the unit, you just don't know what to do next, go to where your pins are and say, like, okay, what is my plan? What is my route? How do I find these elk? And that kind of just shows you how we put a plan together. Kind of just shows you how we put a plan together and how we're able to keep having hunt plans. And again, you can play with this and create more and more and more. And it's kind of like, it's basically what you're looking for in a hunt, and then how do you keep mapping new data onto it. Again, if you're going to go and scout, and you find a bunch of elk sign, mark it, and then maybe say this old or whatever, fresh sign. Maybe you only mark fresh sign. So this gives you the ability to come back after a scout trip and put the pieces together. Even if you're mid-hunt, like, you have a bunch of data, you've been out there for 4 or 5 days, you have a bunch of new data, like, what are you seeing? How do we put a plan together? And how do we be efficient and effective, right? Like, if I had this area and I like, all of a sudden there's, a bunch of elk right here. It's like, okay, maybe we need to switch and we'll be coming up this draw. Or maybe the wind's bad, so, like, we need to come around the top. All those things can be figured out. And this just gives you a bird's eye view of what's all going on. And I know this looks super busy right here, but at the same time, like, this is a bunch of good data, and we can come up with new plans. And because we have folders, we can kind of take them off and look at it again. And just maybe we pull out all of the folders except the critter folders. And that's all the stuff we've actually seen, whether it's wallows, whether it's, rubs, whether it's elk sightings, all of those things. And that's when you really start to figure it out. And that's one of my favorite things to do, is after an entire year, is to come back and just put the critters folder up and say, okay, where am I seeing all the sign? Where am I seeing all the elk? Where am I seeing the wallows? Those type of things. And then I can rebuild my next year's plan based off that information, and not, just speculation, so to speak. And then again, it goes into, like, okay, how do we build routes? How do I efficiently move through this country? And, you'll learn more as you go. And that's the cool part about it. All right. So the next piece of this is, being able to put in your camps. Now, camp is kind of, it's one of those things where you want to be able to efficiently move from area to area, but you also, sometimes have to be in remote locations. Here's a great example. We have this area down here, and we have that area all the way up here. So, what do you camp in the middle? This access was really good when we came off the top, but that's driving all the way around the mountain. So the other thing is to think about is, where you put your camp. And that can matter a lot. Being efficient, this matters compared, or I guess this comes into play with like what your assets are. If you have, a side by side that you can kind of go up and down the roads a little bit easier. Maybe you have a dirt bike and you want to access some of this more remote stuff. All those things kind of play into it. And so deciding on a camp can be really important because it's a matter of like how much ground can we cover? How mobile do we want to be? Maybe you have a camp down on the main road here and you put another camp up where you spike out because you spend a bunch of time. And so those things matter. Putting camps in, I'll usually use pens and I keep a rolling tally of the camps I like too. So, having a camp folder can be beneficial. All right. So now that we've kind of built a number of data points, right? We got our camp, we got our routes, we got all these things that we kind of want to do. We can start to put together a hunt plan. So I'm going to jump into Notion and kind of show you how to put together a hunt plan. We've kind of gone over everything, but within this Notion doc, you'll see the hunt planner, and the hunt planner has a bunch of really cool things. It's got, your rough plans for future, your points allocations, all these things. But down here, you'll have, your my hunts, excuse me. So in the my hunts, you can add these hunts as you will. You could add, say you hunt in Idaho and Montana, whatever. So you can jump into one of the states, and then from there, you've already fill out a bunch of your information, the hunt type, your hunt style, all the map key features that you've put in. But now we can jump in and say, okay, let's put together a hunt plan. So once we have a hunt plan, I like to go in and really just kind of line out exactly what my plans are. And this could be for scouting, it could be for hunting, either way. So I'm going to go and list all of my areas of interest. Maybe it's No Tellum Creek and the Upper North Fork and Liar's Bench, whatever it may be. And then we're going to go through each of the possible routes, right? And then I'm going to list out all my access points. And so you can kind of see how like this puts together a plan in your head. I think a lot of people just kind of say, oh, I'm going to go check it out, right? But if you don't have a specific plan, a lot of times once you start hitting those roadblocks, you tend to forget what you're going to do or lose track or not know what to do next. Where I found that like by having a bunch of these inputted into here, I can say, man, what the heck am I supposed to do? I don't have to think about it in the heat of battle or when I'm completely burnt out, tired, and haven't slept. I can just look at my notes and say, oh, I was going to go check out that trail up, No Tellum Creek. And so having these listed, I create hunt plans. And I think it's important, having different camps, having different areas, all these things you can go check out, all the routes that you plan on taking. And you'd be amazed at how useful this comes in. So check out the Notion doc, fill in all your information. You can add stuff. You can change this however you want. And if you guys got tips or anything, I'd love to hear them. I'd love to hear how we can improve this. So bunch of really cool stuff within this Notion doc. But if you don't want to use it, that's totally fine. I would just recommend, writing out all of your plans. I think the priority would be like, here's the route I want to take. I want to take this route. I want to take this route. I want to check these holes or timber patches or bedding areas or glassing points, all those things. That's kind of like the core of what you want to accomplish. And again, that could be a scout, that could be during a hunt. It just kind of depends on how much time you have. So hopefully this helps you put this all together. Hopefully you got some information out of this, and hopefully it makes you a better hunter, maybe just a more organized hunter.
Alrighty, so that's a glimpse into my e-scouting system. We didn't go over everything, but it's kind of the way I do things, and it gives you kind of a rough idea. Hopefully you guys got some tips or tricks out of it. Maybe you picked up a thing or two. There's definitely more than one way to skin a cat. I think you can go really deep in the weeds on this stuff. And I know some people don't like to go that deep. So, this is the way I do it. There's tons of ways to doing it. My only ask of this is if you got value out of this course, do me a favor and go check out the Elk Hunt podcast. Maybe leave us a review. And if you're interested in my system for finding elk, for getting close to elk, and being successful without getting lucky, then check out the Elk Hunt 201 course where I break down my system for elk hunting. I think it's a great value, and it's a great resource for finding, getting close, and kind of killing your elk. So if you're interested, check that out. But thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you get some value out of it. There's tons of resources. Be sure to check out the Notion doc as well. There's a ton of good information for you guys. Thanks.